Hi there. So, since star travel is so difficult and expensive, I've made this kind of really poor substitute for space travel, which is generating views of stars in space uh, artificially. So, when you start up this thing, you see this fake Milky Way galaxy. It's just kind of a random distribution of stars. Uh, you can zoom in on it, but it's still pretty fake looking. Let's say you want to use an actual star catalog that astronomers have compiled, for instance, the Tycho Star Catalog. If you have one of those, which is about 500 megabytes, it has 2.5 million stars. If you open that thing and then refresh your view, takes so long because there's so many stars in it. So now you have two catalogs here stacked up on each other. There's the random one and the Tycho catalog. Let's get rid of the random one. Then we have to refresh again. Okay, there we go. So now you have the stars. This is, so the equator is the Earth's equator. If you want to view it in galactic coordinates, so called, then you just click on that. It re-renders so that the galaxy, so you're looking at the plane of the galaxy, not the plane of the Earth. So now we have all these stars. If you zoom in on it, it looks kind of mulchy. It's just a whole bunch of little points. Not very pretty. So that's what all these curves are for, so you can kind of pretty it up in an interactive way. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do that. In the Tycho catalog, for instance, there's magnitudes between 0 and 15 or so. I find that after around 12, there gets to be kind of striations in the catalog for where the satellite didn't quite scan, or the things were too dim to make out or something. I'm not sure what, but there appear to be striations. So usually I just go to around 12, mid 12s or so. Then each element in this catalog is rendered either as a point or a star that has a halo on it. A point is just a single pixel in your final image. Right now it's set to 8192 pixels wide. You can pump that up or down depending on your needs. You can change the cutoff for what gets rendered into pixels and what gets rendered into things with halos. So why don't we put that about there? Let's pump up the big stars so that they're more prominent. And you can change the scale of the big ones by dragging this curve around. If your stars are not getting quite big enough, then you can change the scale of your graph by clicking on the bounds, then pumping that up. Let's move that up again. So now somewhere in this image there should be some pretty big stars. Let's hit sort of a big area. There's one. So now you can see what the halos are going to look like. These two things control what the halos are rendered like. So there's kind of a blown out region. You can control the level of blowout. Either not blown out at all, so you see the entire color of the original star, or blown out a little bit. If you look at stars, the points are always blown out. It just kind of looks more realistic. You can control the level of blowout within the halo. You can also control the halo opacity ramp, which is a little bit sensitive. And you can just mess with that until you get something pleasing. If you want to have like round circles, you can play with that to get like totally unrealistic halos, but they're pretty in a way. So you can keep messing around with that until you get something pleasing. So where do these colors come from? In the catalog, it samples on blue wavelengths, a particular blue wavelength, and sort of an overall visual magnitude. That gets processed sort of into an index, the B minus V index, and there's Mitchell Charity has figured out how to map that to colors, more or less. So these curves sort of correspond to data that he's published on the internet. However, that tends to make a lot of little tiny red points. So if you don't like the preponderance of red, for instance, you can change that. Or like, let's say you don't want red at all, you want more green or blue or whatever, then you can mess with these till you get something that you want. Then all these points, by the way, it's kind of just this big mass. So that's why this point opacity thing is here. So you can move this around to kind of sculpt how the points are rendered. Dimmer magnitudes would be dimmer opacity. Alright, so once you get everything like that, then just render, and it takes a minute because there's so many freaking stars. Now, once it's all done, then you can go load up your favorite panorama viewer. Pan around, and there's your star field. So there you go, and this I'll have where the source code is, which I've decided to release on GitHub. It currently only runs on Linux. Maybe someday I'll port it to other stuff. But there you go. Have fun. Leave comments. Thanks.